these are executive orders. This is not a government for and by the people anymore. We really don't have the system of checks and balances that this country was found on. That's why we have the three different branches of government. And that's why, Congress is supposed to have oversight. We don't see that anymore in this country.
Right. I think there's a crucial issue, which is, I hope everybody listening to this program knows that for 20 years, Rumsfeld and Cheney were planning something called continuity of government measures. Originally, this was a quite legitimate activity. What happens if there's an atomic attack and Washington is hit by a nuclear weapon and we are decapitated. We don't have a government anymore. But Cheney and Rumsfeld changed it so it was planning to deal with any emergency, and they got an executive order passed under Reagan which redefined the purpose of COG was to deal with any emergency. And the amazing thing is these two people went on planning for, in effect, the suspension of the American Constitution. That's what it's been called, when neither of them were in the government.
But they were in the continuity of government.
They were in this special thing that was set up under Reagan back in 1981 by a secret order. And there's a biography of Rumsfeld that suggests that Clinton didn't even know what was going on. And the people who were planning it, originally they were Democrats and Republicans, but in the 90s they were all Republicans.
Hold that thought. We're going to be back right after this. I do cover a lot of this in my film Fabled Enemies, the revamping of the continuity of government or shadow government program. Please check it out. It's the Alex Jones Show. I am Jason Bermas sitting in. We'll be back with Peter Dale Scott after this. Going over some of the mainstream news here that, again, foreign mercenary forces are in the United States under the guise of American police force. It's not American. It's not a police force. But we were just talking a little bit about COG and how that kind of intertwines into this government drug dealing. And we talked about Iran-Contra over the break. Why don't you tell people, about Oliver North's revelations about continuity of government during Iran-Contra?
Right. Almost all that we know about continuity of government is actually goes back to the era when Congress, there was a congressional committee on Iran-Contra, and Oliver North was a witness. And a very good journalist, Alonzo Chardy, wrote for the Miami
Herald?
Yes, for the Miami Herald, an article where he described it in some detail as a plan for the suspension of the Constitution. And Congressman Jack Brooks from Texas was on the committee, and he asked Oliver North on camera, on television, is it true that you have been working on plans to suspend the American Constitution? And the most amazing thing happened. The chairman of the committee, who was a Democrat, Senator Inouye, banged his gavel and said, we can't go into that in an open session. We have to go into that in a secret session, thereby telling us all, in effect, that there was something there that was so sensitive that the American people couldn't hear about it. And it was amazing that the New York Times had printed every word of the hearings, and they printed that exchange. But they did a news story about what happened that day and didn't mention that Oliver North, the idea that Oliver North was doing something about suspending the American Constitution was not in the news story or any other mainstream media news story. That's where I really became, for the first time, aware of the increasing gap between what's going on at a deeper level. I call Iran-Contra a deep event, the Kennedy assassination a deep event, 9/11 a deep event. So we're just getting used to the fact that every now and then something happens that we're not going to get to the bottom of. And what we have to be aware of is that cumulatively, these deep events are doing more to shape where the country is going than all the public debate that goes on in Congress. And that's particularly true of 9/11. We still haven't got to the bottom of it. Even the chairman of it had admitted that they didn't get proper information from the CIA. Louis Freeh, who was head of the FBI at the time, has said That is perfectly understandable that people would want a new investigation. And yet, we're not going to get a new investigation because it's a deep event. But the most important constitutional event of this century to date has been the passing of COG on the morning of September the 11th, 2001. And it's barely reported anywhere. The 9/11 report says, yes, it happened, but we decided not to look into COG. They admit in their report that it did happen and that they didn't investigate it.
It is shocking. Some other things that they've said, Lee Hamilton and Thomas Keane did a book, Without Precedent, where they admitted that, NORAD and the FAA just lied to them, and they said it was so far from the truth, we don't know why they said what they did. I was actually one of the first people to get the NORAD tapes, which had been vetted, but, the first person to go through 30-plus hours of audio over, I think it was 21 separate channels. And you listen to these things, and they're talking about drills going on. In fact, in the movie Fabled Enemies, I go over it. They had to call into Cheyenne Mountain 20 minutes after Flight 93 had been downed and ask them to take the inputs out of their screens, out of radar, because they were getting even more hijackings.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and, and I play the audio for you with them frantically calling into Cheyenne Mountain, telling them to take the inputs off. And publicly, we know they were following Delta 1989, which supposedly had a bomb on board. They were following a Korean Airlines plane out of Alaska coming in.
I know about that one because it came down in Canada.
Yes, that's right. It did come down in Canada before it was able to reach.
You read over and over and over that not a single plane was brought down. One plane was forced down. It was forced down by the Canadians who were not clued into whatever was happening.
Well, if you go and you check the FBI's initial, I believe it's Team 8 or Team 7, they've now released some documents where they admit, and they give you the tail numbers of not only the 4 hijacked planes, but 4 more that they thought were hijacked on the morning of 9/11. So we are so far from the truth on that very, very deep event, and it does warrant a new investigation, and I'm hoping that the people over at NYC Can are able to, win their Supreme Court decision. Just getting it to the Supreme Court is almost a victory, and, shining the light in the darkness, and that's what you've been able to do so well. We're going to let you go because we've got an extensive interview to do later on for my upcoming film, Invisible Empire. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Jason. It was a great pleasure to actually see you, just talk to you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much.